Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Wyndham Raymond School Department's Board of Directors meeting. It's Wednesday, April 6, 2022. We convened at 6:30 with 2 executive sessions. We have just exited our second executive session. And before we proceed, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Sure, there is one adjustment which actually comes under item 3 under section 6, which is the motion that will be read momentarily when the board votes. And so Ms. Gavoni actually has the motion itself. So
ready?
When the time comes, we will, which I think is right now. The other adjustment to the agenda is just given the lateness of the hour, I think that I will forego my superintendent's report so that we can jump into budget.
Okay. All right. May I have a motion, please?
Okay. I move to approve the student under consideration be readmitted to school following a team meeting to plan for the student's reentry, and that the superintendent provide the parents with a written summary of the board's findings.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. 8-1. Moving on. Item number 7. We're a little delayed by about almost an hour, but public input, please. If there's anyone who would like to speak, now is your time. You just state your name and where you live.
Hi, my name is Dr. Robin Frost. I'm from Wyndham. I'm the parent president. I think I need to have some understanding of and clarification of an item that was addressed not in last meeting but in the Thursday meeting, and it has to do with discussing the code of ethics. And I understand that this was brought up in regards to Ms. Butler's post and in regards to school board opinion on what if they thought the code of ethics was violated. I understand that there were some people that did believe that, and I just was wondering the follow-up to that and how that works with the school board and some people's opinion in regards to that being a violation of the code of ethics. That's one. And second is that I understand that there has been something in the past in regards to controversial teaching. And I'm just confused about how we're adding the need to introduce controversial teaching when our teachers are already, overloaded with what they're doing in teaching academics. Controversial teaching should not be in our school district, in our school system. We should not be having to discuss controversial issues as the teachers are not trained to in this area. And controversial issues are not the academics that our kids should be learning. It should not even be an issue that should be discussed. And lastly, if I finish this in time, that if our parent group, and I think a lot of us support this, but if our district again has any type of proposal in universal masking or the option to place a medical device on our children's face, that is a district decision, and that proposal and is voted on by the board, that it will not be recognized by parents, and whatever the consequences may be, then we're just going to have to come up with an alternative way to educate our children. Because it's, in our opinion, again, I know there's a lot of changes that keep happening back and forth, in our opinion, that it's not this board or the superintendent's decision ability to make a decision about applying something medically to our children. That should be a parent's option and choice whether they want to or they don't want to. So that was our stand. I thank you and have a great night.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Ken Clark. And we'll touch on some of the stuff that Robin had mentioned. I guess a lack of trust is one of the things that I find is existent here. There have been situations where we've been advised that something's not in the classroom, it's been taken out of the classroom, and it's back into the classroom. So what I want to put forward here, and I know that it's been portrayed, and even Charlie, you mentioned, like, I guess it's bad parenting because I didn't know that was coming out and wasn't able to keep track of it. But in summary, we shouldn't have to police this as much as we are. I don't want to be here. I really don't. But I'm only doing it because of my child, and what I'm fearing is being fed into her brain. And it's not good stuff. Like the sexual content we've been discussing, they can go into any bathroom they want. It just goes on and on and on. So I just want to be clear right now that to my teachers, the faculty, and the staff, my daughter's legal name is registered with the school as Morgan. She's not to be called anything else by anybody. And if you're here, she's called by someone else, by your friends, I want to know about it. If she is called anything else, has a pin tag on her, she has permission, is going to call me immediately and let me know what the situation is, and I'm going to act on it that day. Her race is irrelevant to anyone, including her teachers, faculty, staff. And most importantly, I don't want her participating in any surveys. So I'm saying this publicly right now. She's not to do that. Okay? Because you say we have the choice, so I'll let you know. I've got to put the burden back on the school. And the reason for the surveys, again, is whatever you guys think, the information's held to the child. You can tell us that it's not, but data is tracked, period. I don't believe you guys on that. A teacher's, faculty, or staff's ideologies, political references and belief are irrelevant to my daughter's education and academic development. Okay? She's not to be subjected to any of this, period. If she is, again, she has my permission to leave the classroom, call me, and tell me what's going on with it. Her sexuality is absolutely none of anyone's business. She's not to be subjected to any conversations regarding sexual orientation by anyone in the school for a myriad of reasons. Her teachers have degrees to, I hope, in English, math, science, and those type of things. I don't believe any of these teachers have a degree in psychology to deal with adolescents. And if I'm wrong in that, let me know. But if they don't have the training, these teachers, they shouldn't be talking to our kids about it. Because the research I've done says that what they're being taught, and I've talked to child psychologists. I was standing up, I wasn't laying down. Maybe I should have been, but anyway. I was talking to some psychologists, and they say this is detrimental and very harmful to the kids. I spoke with experts. I don't know if anyone at the school has taken the time to do that, principals, superintendents, but we should consult with other people. They say what's going on with this is that a lot of times a kid has another issue that happened at home that traumatized them. They could have been raped. They might be going through divorce.
Appreciate your time.
And
Thank
going
you.
to this stuff for the wrong reasons in the tournament. I wish I could have finished the last thing.
Hi, I'm Kristen Day. So this is also about the pronoun pins at the middle school. I understand that the Gay Straight Alliance made the pins available to students in line with International Transgender Day of Disability. I support all students in their individual rights, Gay Straight Alliance, Civil Rights Team, and I don't question the content or their focus. I wish that could go without saying, but I feel that I need to start with that. I know the outreach to student body through the Civil Rights Team comes down from the Maine Attorney General, but outreaching to students with controversial info and activities at this level is new, and it needs to be regulated like everything else that's public. There are moral arguments against the school encouraging students to label themselves with tags, but students have the right to wear the pins if they choose. My concern is that students also have the right not to be exposed to a school-sponsored activity about their peers' gender during school hours, especially without giving parents notice. In this case, who is responsible for the teaching that goes along with the activity? As it is now, there's a school policy governing controversial topics in curriculum, as this is considered mandatory exposure. But controversial topics in a club activity, such as this or the infamous survey, are considered by the district to be choice-based because they're not part of curriculum. So in the classroom, it's policy. Outside the classroom, with no guidance or supervision, no policy. When the student is in school by law and the controversial activity causes an unavoidable buzz and fixation on gender and sexuality in the student body, which my daughter has experienced, the exposure at that point ceases to be choice-based and is then mandatory. I don't doubt that the activity was valued by some students and staff, but I can tell you that it also created a distraction to learning that day. Some kids were wearing pins to mock the idea. Kids all day were asking each other about their gender and sexuality. Days later, they're still calling each other gay, my daughter and her friends. Some kids don't like the topic being forced on them, so more division is created. It's just really upsetting because we had come so far and it just feels like it's getting torn down. Sexual identity is nobody's business. My daughter doesn't have to have any thoughts on anyone's gender and doesn't need to hear about it or talk about it to respect everybody in school as individuals. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what middle school is actually like, it's definitely not appropriate for ages 11 to 14 to make gender idea focused because it directly leads to private issues like sexuality being mainstream conversation. Until the clubs are operating under guiding school board policy, any outreach with controversial topics should not be done during school hours.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hi everybody, I'm Stephen Napolitano. I just recently put in a full request asking for a list of the books that teachers are introducing to the students in the classroom. I was told that there is no tracking on that, and I'm going to ask if you can consider putting a policy that we do keep track of that, because I think it's very important that parents should be allowed to see that. The only thing I'll say about the budget in general is that I think it would be I wouldn't approve a budget without seeing a list of the past year's expenditures in a column right next to what the amount of money you're asking for the upcoming year. I just think that's the professional way to do it. Anybody that's in business would make good business decisions based on looking at that information and comparing them. I haven't seen that, and I've asked for that. I thought it was online. As far as the workshop, I attended the workshop a couple weeks ago. Very interesting conversations that went on. I appreciate the effort that was put in. Mr. Howell did a great job facilitating. One of the topics that came up was the Code of Ethics guidelines. Should we keep it or not keep it? There were some that were saying get rid of it because we're not following it. Can you imagine the headlines that the school board got rid of the Code of Ethics guidelines? Or we could start enforcing those Code of Ethics. I was disappointed to see that Mrs. Butler raised her voice at another board member, and unless it happened in private, I think an apology should be given in a small room, and that was very disappointing to see. However, the conversation was healthy, and I'm very appreciative that you all did do that. The middle school recently did, as you just heard, recognize on March 31st International Transgender Day with the Gay Straight Alliance group. Great. But there was no notification. It's still one of those sensitive topics. There's no choice there at all when the parents aren't notified with that. And I heard staff was allowed to participate if they chose to do that. So as a parent, I love everybody. Teach my kids to love everybody. I also want the choice to have the ability to talk to my child before events happen like that. Also, still confused with the school deciding what's appropriate and what's not with Black Lives Matter propaganda all over the in areas of the school. The thin blue line flags are not allowed. It's just not clear. Can Christians go and put stuff up on the walls? And you know, I talked about the Second Amendment issue. It's very, very unclear, and it's too gray. So I'm looking for more clarity. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none. Are we skipping superintendent's report?
Just a couple things that I want to comment on. First of all, I might as well. So first of all, just a couple things that came up tonight. The district's had a controversial issues policy since we became a district in 2008. The most recent policy rewrite was to take a look at whether or not it was still relevant. That policy went through our attorneys as well as MSMA to make sure that we were relevant and correct for where we need to be right now. Just also, I've heard, and there was actually some questions that came up about club activities, and I know there were some questions that came up in board roundtable last week, and so I did spend some time this week looking at federal law, and the federal law for clubs and activities actually comes out of an Equal Access Act of 1984, which provides equal opportunity to any club that for any school that receive federal funds. So if you do one thing for one club and you allow things for that particular club, then all clubs actually have that access. So whether it be access to the announcements, access to newsletters, access to listserv messages, access to activities. So if you have one student group that's allowed to do something, every student group, whether someone agrees, disagrees, whether somebody sees it as being controversial, non-controversial, the caveat within the law, because I actually think, Mike, this was your question that came up, which was the activity cannot have a significant impact and cause a significant disruption, and the disruption bar is super, super high, and that disruption bar can't be triggered by those people who see the issue as being controversial to them but not controversial to the people who are actually participating in the activity. And much of this came out of religious freedom discussions back in the 80s, and so I do have some materials that I'm preparing for the board just based on the questions. But anything or any activity related to a protected class or discussions about a protected class falls under main human rights law, and then also would fall under this Equal Access Act. And I know it can be difficult and it can be confusing, and I'll be working over this next week to provide some additional clarification on the board for the board members on where some of those lines fall. I don't have it prepared for tonight, but since it came up. And then, lastly, you just talk about, and Stephen, thanks for bringing up the FOA request, which you did, which there were two components of that, which was and the public is more than welcome to know this, that all of our library books are available online. So it was one question, what were all the library books that are in RSU 14? And if you go to our website, go into the libraries, all of our libraries are digital. So if you want to go, and first of all, if you're interested in a book, you can go and see if the book's available in the library, and if you want to check it out, you can see if it's there. But there's a complete listing that's there of every single book that's within the holdings of the elementary schools, middle schools, and the high school. In addition, there was a question about, do we have a listing of every single book in every single classroom? And for the hundreds of thousands of books that are in RSU 14 that have been introduced over the last 50 to 60 years in classroom libraries, we don't. If somebody would like books that are in the general curriculum, they can go to two places. One are the curriculum guides that are available on the website, and they also can go to the libraries, because sometimes those books are checked out from the libraries and are used by classroom teachers, and the librarians will order more than one. But for every single book that is on every single shelf, we do not have a record of that, and books come from a myriad of places. Teachers go out and buy their own books. Books are donated from book fairs. Books are donated from previous teachers. For those of you who may be alum of the Windham School Department or Raymond School Department, you actually might find books that you checked out years ago that are still within the holdings, that still may be in a classroom library. I know often when a teacher retires, their books get handed on to others at the grade level. So it's just not something that we have, and in order to create and generate such a list, it would be hundreds of hours of work to go classroom by classroom by classroom. I would just suggest members of the public have questions about specific books for classroom teachers, or questions about books that might be used in particular units that are listed in the course guides or that are listed in the different syllabus that are posted on our website. Always a good chance or a good spot to go to the teacher, go to the principal, and reach out and just ask some questions about that. So we do not have a complete listing of the 318 classrooms. We have roughly 318 classroom teachers plus other spaces beyond what's in the libraries. But if you want to go see the libraries, go on the RC14 website, and all the books are listed there and are present.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 9, Board Roundtable.
I forgot to mention last week when we were talking about Odyssey of the Mind, there was a special award given out to one of our students. It's called the Omer Award, and it recognizes an individual, coaches, team members, parents, officials, and others who during the tournament serve as exemplary examples or role models through their actions or words. And this was awarded to a Manchester student, Harley Menard. So I just wanted to thank her for doing a great job. And also just officially wanted to request maybe we could get the first place team to come so we could recognize them for that. That's it.
Thank you. Yeah. Marge.
A couple of things. Okay, a couple of things I want to float by the board to see if people want to consider it for possible agenda items. One of them is therapy dogs in the schools. I think it would be a healthy discussion to have if we get enough people on the board who agree with me. And the other one is implementing cursive writing. You know, I only bring it up because I have grandchildren who can't sign their name. You know, it's kind of, and I've tried to teach, but anyway, I am not a teacher. Believe me, I'm lucky I can read my own writing sometimes. So those are the two things I would like to see if we could take a consensus of the board to see if we could propose it to the team, our leadership team, to consider putting it on the agenda. And
Go ahead.
Go ahead, say that.
As far as therapy dogs, it is on our list already.
Okay.
Because we've had a request from both a student and a principal, and I spoke to the principal this week. So unless there's any opposition, that is already on our list to consider.
Okay. How about the second one?
Can we get a consensus for cursive?
And I'm only talking just discussion. I mean, it doesn't have to, even if it
A
doesn't.
discussion?
Yeah, it's a discussion on whether we should consider it.
It's called an agenda item. I'm for it.
Oh, you want to know who's for it?
Yeah. For just,
It doesn't hurt to discuss it.
okay.
Right.
Oh, I'm happy to discuss it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we can't vote. Okay, and my last thing is, and as everybody knows, we have a backpack program in the RSU 14, and for people who do not know, the backpack program sends food home with some students every Friday, and it's for the weekend. It was very difficult during COVID, and I want to thank our nutrition department, Jeannie Riley and her group or whatever, did a wonderful time. The last 2 years, I mean, they have given out so much food. It's unbelievable. But now we're back on track again doing the backpack program. And there's two things I want to thank. I want to thank everybody out there who has contributed and continues to contribute, because we only accept money for that program, because everything that goes in those students' bags when we pack has to be the exact same thing, because we have to be careful of weight and everything else. Of course, nutrition's important, because some of it's from kindergarten, it's the elementary grades, and if they're too heavy, I mean, these kids got to carry them home in their backpacks on Friday. So thank you for everybody out there who continues to contribute to that, and of course that goes to central office. They hold our money for us. And secondly, I want to thank all the volunteers who come every Tuesday to help me pack those bags, and we've been doing it for a few years now. Some of the volunteers change, and some of us are getting older, so it's kind of like great when the younger people, parents, come in and help. But I want to thank everybody. It's a great program, and we could not do it without the support of the community and all of the volunteers. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Marge. Anyone else?
So, oh, sorry, thank you. So, Chris, question for you. Last fall, open houses for schools were canceled because of COVID. Is there any chatter about doing something this spring about, like, having open houses or anything for parents to come in, anything like that?
Nothing planned for the spring, but moving to the fall, yes.
Okay. I just, even as a parent of a freshman at the high school, I still feel kind of lost because it's been a lot of years since I was a student at the high school, so I just think it still may be helpful to just throwing that out there. The other question that I had was a follow-up from a previous request about the potential of developing a list of clubs that are sponsored by the schools, or maybe not sponsored is the wrong word, but that are tied to or hosted by or clubs somehow affiliated with the school system.
It was in your board packet last
Was
week.
it?
Yep.
Yep. I missed that. Thank you. Something that was brought up in public comment, so controversial topics. In my opinion, we should have a policy, specifically because not everyone agrees what is controversial. For me, talking about the Holocaust certainly is not controversial, but for some people in the world, it's very controversial. So I think we do need a policy so everybody's on a level playing field and understands the ground rules. And then Mr. Clark's comments about how he has conversations with his child about his expectations and what his concerns are, I think is very valid, and I think it's the mark of a good parent to do that. I also would suggest that, again, that people partner with your children's teachers. Develop a relationship, have conversations. I think that too much is being assumed on both sides of the fence and maybe even the people in the middle of the fence. So the only way to break down those assumptions is to have conversations. The last thing on my list is that, I've been a human resources professional for over 25 years. And I cannot emphasize enough how wrong it is to label people by how they look, what they believe, their gender, or any other protected class, or label that creates division amongst students or staff. Specifically, advertisements of a person's sexuality is inappropriate and unprofessional in a school setting with varied levels of maturity. And I'm citing back to the what happened at Wyndham Middle School with the gender identity pins. I'm just declaring again how inappropriate I think that was. Thank you.
So I had nothing on my list, and now I have a bunch. Code of ethics. I just want to say again, and some of you were at that discussion. A lawyer told us that there's no teeth to it, so that was kind of the discussion. And I think I was probably one of the people that said it. If it doesn't have any teeth to it, then why are we bothering? So perhaps changing the title of it, because Code of Ethics suggests something, obviously, which it's not, and that's just the reality right now. I'll piggyback on the pronoun pins. And you mentioned about the threshold about when clubs are doing things. And I want to acknowledge you guys are just in such a hard spot, as Char just said. What I think is fine, somebody else will disagree with, and that's kind of the world you have to live in, is, where it might be a book I don't like, but then somebody else might not like Huck Finn, right, because of words in it or something. So it's a hard thing you guys are doing. But I think back to when we were getting done with the masks, and I think it was a lot of staff came, and they talked about the concerns about bullying. When the masks come off, is there going to be bullying? And I think we kind of heard tonight in the discussion on the pins that there was the possibility of bullying with the pens. And again, I acknowledge, I'm not blaming, I'm just saying that's the world you guys live in, is, yeah, that. And I'll tell you, my interest in the whole gender thing is I work in the political world, and I work with adults that have had gender stuff, and I know the suicide rates, and it really kind of bothers me on that level that it all kind of feels like fun and games now, but sometime it gets very serious when people are adults. Char has mentioned, last you didn't tonight though, but a couple of times you mentioned about just getting involved in elections and things are coming up, and we keep hearing, well, the state put this on us, the feds put this on us. We're all going to get a chance this summer and in November to speak out about that. So that's my pitch for tonight. And then the last thing is just the civil rights team is here next week, and I don't think there'll be public questions, right? It'll be our questions. So, all right. Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
I just wanted to say that we received an email, I think it was tail end of last week, from Ryan Caron. It was an informational email that went out. And he was basically letting everybody know that the half day that was coming up today was about mental health. And so I read down through the email. I read what the keynote speaker was, and then what I further on, basically all the students were going to select breakout sessions that they were going to attend. And they were still going to end up getting dismissed at, I don't know, I think it was like 10:30 or something like that. It was because it was an early release. So I read down through it, and I read down through the 4 breakout sessions, and I went to the websites of each one of those breakout sessions, and I kind of read up a little bit on which one of those organizations and what they represented, and I had basically what happened was it ended up leading to a family discussion. All right, we had the information presented to us from the school as to what was happening. It was a little bit of a sensitive topic. I actually elected to allow my daughter to completely bug out on school for the day. Told her that she didn't really need to go. My wife overruled me. She said she had to go. My daughter obviously didn't want to go, but she was cool with going because it meant that we have a standing rule that if you don't go to school, then you don't participate in after-school sports. So just by getting that information, Chris, it allowed our family to have a great dialogue, and it was fantastic. So I would highly encourage that principals continue doing that. Obviously, my daughter is in high school. She's not in middle school, and I am curious whether or not that same information was sent out about International Transgender Day and whether or not pins were going to be sent out all through the middle school, because I'm hearing that for the first time right now. So I'm curious if that email was sent out.
There was not an email sent out for club activity. Not every club sends out emails about activities that are going on.
Okay. All right. But it did impact the entire school.
That obviously had an impact because people are here, yes.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, this is the first time I'm hearing about it, so thank you.
Anybody else? I just want to address the retreat that we had in the Code of Ethics. And though we had a vigorous discussion about the Code of Ethics, at the end of the day, it was determined that it would go back to the Policy Committee. And the Policy Committee will review our current ones. And I sent you all that information. So every board member's in the loop about the next step. Code of Ethics is going to be reviewed. We're going to look at ours. We're going to look at others, and come back to the board when we're ready with something to share. Okay. I don't want to put you on the spot, Al. But
yeah, I can. Yeah, I got stuff. I was gonna wait till later, but might as well just do it now. Hold on.
Okay.
My phone will let me in. Let's see. There we go. All right, so the first thing I have is the quiz show that was recorded a couple weeks ago. We have the date for that, so that's going to be on April 21st at 8 p.m. on PBS. So we're competing against North Yarmouth Academy.
Mrs. Briggs. I texted you today. What? You got it?
What time again?
8 p.m. 8 p.m. on PBS. Yep. The prom drive is going to be happening. The students will actually be able to get their dresses and suits next week. And I think so far we have a lot of donations. We have over probably 50 dresses and suits altogether, so there's a pretty good selection. I just wanted to mention that I thought the mental health summit today that we had at the high school, the speaker that we had, I thought he was really, really great. I think he connected a lot with the students, and I think we didn't really know what to expect when we walked in there, but I think we all felt like, wow, that was actually worth being there for.
Good.
And finally, Jordan Small Middle School's musical of Willy Wonka is Friday and Saturday at 7, and I'm doing lighting for that, so I'll be there. And that's it.
It'll be good lighting.
Yes.
Perfect. We're going to move on to the meat of the matter this evening, which is number 10, RSU 14, 2023 budget discussion. And we left it last week. Mr. Howell gave us a presentation of where we landed currently, and we knew that wasn't the figure that would ultimately be voted on by this board. And the marching orders for Mr. Howell were to go back and give us different scenarios of what a dollar amount cut would look like for the bottom line. And our process is we don't, as a board, make specific recommendations. We give them a target, and they go back to the A-team, and the A-team determines the priorities of the district and comes back with recommendations for us. So I will turn it over to Mr. Howell.
We've got two handouts coming around. If you wouldn't mind, Al, actually, I'll keep one for myself.
Just one?
Should be one of each.
No, me?
So what's up, and actually for, I need to put this on for all of you. What I did is I updated the presentation that, I don't see a remote. This is what happens when you come over here. Let me see. Give that a second to come up.
Chris, there's not a lot of extra public. Would you mind if we share this
actually,
and
please
hand out
do.
to
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
public as well? Just so they know what we're talking about as well.
The dollar sheet, yes. The other one, Shar. You know what? Actually, both are fine. Both are good. So last time we had a chance to meet, was that last week?
It was.
Things blend together now.
There's a lot of things blending together right now. But part of the discussion from the board and part of the discussion from the previous night's finance meeting was to take a look at some additional cuts, which we acknowledged. And so to look at from the percentage that we were at, which was at 5 3/4, and I think with pre-K, we were in somewhere like 5.4 when you took pre-K out, because that's an expenditure, but it's also direct revenue in for that. So board asked us to take a look at 0.75%, 1%, 1.25%, and 1.5%, what that would look like for cuts. And just so the public knows, 1% on our budget, $54.5 million budget, is basically $545,000. Works out to be 1%. So Stacy and I had a chance to meet, and for those of you who don't know Stacy Webster, she's our district accountant. She does much of the bookkeeping for the district. We met the end of this past week. A-team met yesterday, and we started looking at potential ideas and potential spots that we could actually look at for some cuts. And of the two sheets you have in front of you, just to give an idea for the board, and I know folks up back, you have it right now, we started at an open the door, which basically is if you take the staff that we have now and you have what was a higher number at that point, which we originally budgeted a 12% increase for health insurance, open the door just to go staff to staff. What we have right now was 4.5%. That included all negotiated contracts, all the different pieces that go along with it. When I came to you in 1st of March for the first initial budget presentation, that presentation was at 6.82%. And we knew, and as it is with any sort of a budget process, we know that there's going to be some changes. So that 6.82, health insurance a little bit higher. To bring health insurance in at 12%, brought it down to 5.89. We then learned that we had the opportunity to expand pre-K, and I think this past year we've had over 90 people who are on our wait list for pre-K. I think we're going to see the exact same number for this year. We do have the opportunity to, at that point, we thought we were going to be able to add 26 additional slots, 26 additional slots. And so we had to do an increase for that because there's an expense to it, and there's also, again, the revenue side. We learned a couple of weeks ago that the max rate for health insurance for districts was going to be 8% this year. Out of the MEA Benefits Trust, which, by the way, is an Anthem product. I don't know if everyone saw in the news today that looks like Maine Med's flexing its muscles with a little bit of a negotiation technique and said that Anthem will not be an in-network provider, but health insurance would be at 8%. The last time I was with you, 5.37% was without pre-K, so if you want to go budget to budget. And that's where we left off when we left last time. Since then, this is the A-team had a chance to meet. We had a chance to look at some additional items. We have brought that down to 4.25%. And health insurance did come in today at 7.6, which is not where we hoped that we would be. I did talk to Superintendent Gorham today. They came in at 8. Something that's just for the public, and maybe people don't know this, or maybe that they do, but and for the board, you may not know. When we have our health insurance and we have our health insurance pool, we typically have a handle on what's going on for health issues within the district and have an understanding with that. When people retire from our district, they still stay within our pool and they still stay on our plan. So even though they're not with us, they still stay on our plan until they're Medicare eligible, and then they go off and they're heading on to a different product for that. So oftentimes our health insurance rates are not impacted by our current employees, they're impacted by past employees and some of the considerations for that. So if you were to go with that health insurance change, we're at 4.19, 4.2. If you were to go budget to budget, then you're looking at roughly a 4% increase over past years. So this one sheet, this one pager just kind of gives you a history. I did prepare a couple slides because I think it's important for people to know what is it that led to close to an $800,000 cut as far as what is appearing there. So I'm just going to kind of scan through quickly here. This is the slide we used last week. So some of those significant budget changes. So first of all, Wyndham High School, Ryan came in when he did his budget presentation. High school's looking to do algebra every day instead of the alternating day. They need an additional staff member to do that, and that's helping to make up for some of our COVID loss, but also just helping to make sure our students have a very strong foundation. That continues to be in there. We do have a study hall tech who is retiring this year, and the high school has offered that up as a cut because of being able to shift around some of those duties for study hall and not fill that position. I know Raymond Elementary School, there's a line through the .2 social worker for one more additional year. We think that we can pull that out of ESSER funds and use that for social emotional support for students, and making sure that we're providing those supports, which I think you heard as a common theme throughout the budget process, that that's a definite need. For Jordan Small, the grade 5 teacher, still in the budget. We know we've got an enrollment bump that left Best Schools going over to Randy's. That's still in there. However, that .2 social worker that Randy talked about, shifting that over to ESSER. For Katahdin program, still an ed tech reduction, and that ed tech reduction is being turned into paying for a school counselor or part of a school counselor position. This budget does include still high school computer refresh. It is only grades 10 through 12, because grade 9 we're receiving a significant amount of money this year from the state MLTI program to offset the costs, and looking at some technology funds from this current year that we can pay that this year and not have expense moving forward with it. High school, and actually the entire A team felt very strong that if we get out of our computer purchase cycle, it's going to create some greater difficulties. Our machines, which are going into year 5, are starting to show some memory issues for what some of our high school students are asking of them. And so looking to do that. If those, of course, will be reallocated, and those will live another life for the next 4 to 5 years at other grade levels. Transportation still includes addition of some bus driver to take care of some overcrowding on some runs. That's a partial bus driver, and it'll be added to other positions that are currently there. This still does include .2 ELL teacher. Our English as a second language population has increased with our district. Still includes a reduction of 11 ed techs, and also still includes, people felt very strongly about this, is that we're reducing positions, and we really need to make sure that we're bumping up hours for our current ed techs. So we're currently at 32 and a half. That cut was made in 2008, 2009, if I remember correctly, and they've been reduced ever since to make sure that we have some additional hours for that. The grade 4 teacher, we're going to shift to ESSER for one more year. We have project money for that. The .7 instructional interventionist, which is another interventionist at Manchester, is still there. The reason it's .17 is there's .29 of another position that will be added to. This did include the reduction of the HR payroll person. The full-time person, we will be going with a part-time, which we had budgeted for. We'd hoped to bump that to full-time, but there are other priorities ahead of us. The .2 music teacher, and then the pre-K partnerships or expansion. We're only going to be partnering with one provider this year, which will put us at 10 additional slots for that. So the other sheet that I want to bring to the board, and which is this kind of a priority sheet. Board members, you got this last night. Just so that you understand what some of these things are. So this is all based on tier. So if we were to go 0.75%, this is what we would look to cut first. 1%, those would be the next items. 1.25%, those would be the next items. And if we were to go to 1.5%, what that would result in. What you have in front of you for the 4.05, and that's again without pre-K, includes everything up to 1.25%, which actually ended up being a little bit more than 682. It was a little over $700,000 in cuts. I think it was closer to 720. But the salary benefit reduction, those were some reserves that we were keeping for unemployment and some other pieces that we're going to be reducing out of the budget. Also involved looking at some of our turnover savings that may possibly happen as we have people retiring. The early release retirement is paying off a lease this year and then not having it in next year's budget. So, and it's not a recurring item, so that we're not going to be trapped into creating ourselves a little cliff that we have to do in future years. The grade 4 teacher to ESSER, that's a reduction. Core switch, nobody knew what a core switch was until October of last year, when one died in the middle of October, and we had 2 weeks of difficult internet. This is a redundant core switch for the Raymond side of the house and Manchester, because that runs off a separate trunk. Bill had budgeted to do a campus sign which has been discussed forever at Wyndham High School and the Wyndham Middle School entrance and Wyndham Primary. That would be the reduction, not that you're here to do that. Elimination of a third bus. We had 3 buses in the budget. This is $22,000 is not the cost of a bus. A bus is $110,000. This is a 1 year of a 5-year lease. We did not get approved this year for any subsidy for any additional buses. And so this would actually be, we have 2 buses coming off of lease. We would be purchasing 2 additional buses to make sure that we continue our fleet as far as keeping it up at the right age. And then service truck lease. We had a service truck. The white service truck is getting towards the end, and we're working to try to find something that we could possibly do this year to remove it out of next year's budget. Moving down through high school study hall, I talked about that, the .4 HR payroll, and out-of-district placement. That's not actually reduction of an out-of-district placement. That is shifting that over into federal funds through local entitlement. Social work we talked about. Insurance reduction, when I sent this last night, I was hoping we'd see at least a 2-3% reduction. 0.3% is not going to give us a whole lot of a savings. This also does include the reduction of an elementary tech integrator, which I know we've heard through the budget process was a part of interest. Anything beyond that, beyond the 700 that we're at right now, is going to be the reduction of current staff and is going to be an increase to class sizes. I mean, if we're going to go any farther than that. So that's where we're at. Again, if you want to put us in perspective to other districts, I checked the spreadsheet again today where other districts are at. I know Portland just approved yesterday at 5-1. It's going to their city council. Gives you an idea of where RSU 14 is right now, budget-wise, in comparison to some of our districts around us. And just the last piece here, everyone always likes to have the historical, where you see for the 4.1, 4.2, and that is with pre-K. Gives you an idea of comparison to past budget years. We were at, last year was definitely low. We had quite a bit of federal money and other things that we were able to move things over in order to help with reducing some tax burden.
Question. So, here's my question. Are you proposing 4.05, or are you proposing, because on there we've got 419?
I will tell you that 419 and 405 are the exact same thing. They have the same exact tax impact.
Okay.
In essence, and I think we talked about it, it'd be good for the public to hear. For most other grants, they exist outside the budget, and it's money in, money out. And in this case, we'll receive subsidy, but that subsidy will be paid to those providers that are providing pre-K. You have an expense, you have the revenue. It just goes, it's a flow through.
Oh, I don't have my button on, I'm sorry. Anyway, didn't matter. Just one more. On the technology, I just wanted to, and I didn't bring it, I meant to bring it. Do you have it on there, that chart, Bob's?
The replacement schedule?
Yeah, the replacement schedule. It was a few years ago, as a board, we approved making up that type of a schedule, because then we would have a better idea, and I think we kind of all agreed to it. So I don't have a problem. I kind of know, because this discussion did come up last time, but I think if we're going to change his plan, I think that has to be a different discussion rather than bringing it up now, because we did all basically agree to what his plan is, his replacement plan. You don't have that, right?
Actually, I do. Christine just brought it up. I'm going to switch it over.
Because some people weren't on the board at that point in time, so they're not familiar with that. And that was put in place mainly for this purpose. So we wouldn't be have him coming before us at the last minute saying, oh, guess what? Because that is a big expense, and we understand that.
It is. And let's make that a little bigger. Thanks. My first day with technology.
Maybe it doesn't have enough memory.
That's Marge.
Any question about this?
Not this.
Not this.
Not this one, sorry.
What about you?
I don't have any questions about this.
So a clarification, there hasn't been a change to that reflected in what's been proposed for budgets, correct?
No, I think why we're noticing it this year is that last year, where we were with COVID, where we were with stability with money, we worked as hard as we could to not have a tax increase. In fact, I think last year is the first year in RSU 14 there was actually significant tax reduction for additional subsidy that we received. What we did to help reduce that last year, which is why the percentage was down so low, is that we paid the remaining payment on the lease early, which in essence then created a little bit of a fiscal cliff, not in that year, but in the next year. So typically what we try to do with funds is that like with buses, when buses end up on a lease, you finish up the lease, you start a new lease, you just continue to roll through. In this case, we ended a year early to help reduce taxation and to help the public out, and it's showing up now as an increase.
Any questions about this before we move on to the broader discussion? Anybody have any thoughts?
Thoughts on what?
On this,
The
or-
budget? No, we're done with that. Yes.
Just up to you, and then it looks like we're not voting on anything tonight, so we're going to get more shots at this. So just, you don't have to answer these all, Christine. So first thought is Anthem. I have Anthem insurance, so I'm guessing it's like the Red Sox and their best pitcher arguing, and they're going to figure it out. But is there any implications other than people will have worse insurance January 1st, perhaps?
At this point, honestly, we don't know. There was no information given to us ahead of time that was coming. I saw the same Channel 8 announcement on my phone, I think, as everybody else did.
Yeah, afternoon.
So we don't know, but schools in Maine are all under the MEA Benefits Trust, which is an Anthem, which is supported by Anthem, so.
Yeah. Okay. And this is maybe one for another day, but ESSER, I wasn't here when that all came to play, and when I went to college, they taught you any money you get, spend, or else you won't get it again. But now as an adult, and I realize, well, it's really costing people, and it's not always good to spend. So I'm curious of the implications that we have things that we're funding through this, and then eventually that money's not going to be there anymore. So I don't know if that's, you don't have to answer that, but I wonder if that's something we could, in the future, kind of hear about. What are we going to be held, what are we going to be holding one of these years, or cutting?
I'd love to answer it, actually, because it's a discussion that we've had, which is we had put money aside in a class size reduction project that will cover the fourth grade position. When that money runs out in '24, you're absolutely right. At some point in the future, it is something that we're going to need to address. Something that we are seeing, though, is that we are seeing, and it's difficult to predict right now because during COVID, people did make other educational arrangements. Many kids came back, and a great example is over 100 some odd people went to homeschool, and we typically have 30 kids homeschool. People are now starting to come back, especially now that mask mandate's been lifted and some of those other things starting to make those decisions. We may be able to move some people around from some other class placements in order to be able to cover it. So yes, it's going to have an impact. Definitely, we have the money till '24, and to the extent that we can use it in order to be able to support classrooms. I mean, we could go without the position in fourth grade. It's just going to mean greater class numbers.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that right now. Okay, another thing to think about, you don't need to answer this moment, I would be curious of all the cuts that we've made in the last, you've made, I guess, what you would consider the most painful one. And you can answer that now, or you can tell us.
I actually can answer it right now, and if you use the sheet, you can actually go down to the tech integrator portion. That's the one that I think as we were having the discussion, I don't even think, as we were having the discussion yesterday, that's the one that has the sting, just because we've seen the benefit and the engagement that's come from it. And right now, it's falling on 2 people for 638 staff, and it would definitely be something. So this is an order of pain. If you get to the bottom one there, starting to get teacher reduction and getting some class size up, that's the ouch. That's the.
Been there before. Okay, 2 quick ones. You mentioned 1 pre-K next year. Is that just the way it worked out, or is that a choice?
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, please.
So 1 pre-K partnership. That was
right, partnership.
1 local provider was ready to partner.
All right, so we were talking to 2, but 1's not ready.
Correct, and there were others. We're talking with many providers. All of the providers in both Wyndham and Raymond have been invited to meetings and will continue to be invited. We had 7 potentially interested partners back when we first applied for the grant that we did not get. But at this time, we have 1 that's ready to go for next year.
Okay. Good.
We hope that will grow in the future.
This last one probably easy too. No bus subsidy at all, or was it just only 2?
We didn't have any bus subsidy.
Didn't get any at all. Wow.
No, last year we put in for 3. We had 3 approved.
Yeah, is that strange not to get any?
I think it's last year. Everybody, I don't believe anybody in the state was rejected last year. So I think what's happening is now we're all going to play catch up for a number of years and whether or not that's going to get approved.
Okay. Thank you. That's me.
Okay.
Please. So I'm looking at this sheet that you gave us here with all the different versions on it. And I go down to version 6, where I see health at 8%. And then am I to read this correctly that our budget at that point would be $55,237,245.74? Am I reading that correct?
That would be, yep.
Okay. But then I skip down to version 8. And I'm seeing that health is actually coming in at 7.69%. So it's coming in cheaper, right? And it's $54,423,178.59, correct? That's a difference of $814,000.
That's not health insurance, though. That's including all these other things that are on the list.
What's that?
This is including all the other items on the list as well.
And so this version 8 that you have right here is reducing all of this.
Yep.
Except the last line.
Except for the very last line.
Yep.
1.25 and up.
Not the 2 positions.
That and the 0.3.
Okay. All right, well, that's why I asked the question. I didn't understand. I thought I just found something. We can go home!
No, and health insurance is a significant driver, and again, we were hoping for quite a drop.
Yeah.
And we did not receive that. But if you go from version 5, which was at 55.5, and go to version 8, which is 54.3, that's what, 1.2 million, which is roughly 2%.
Well, I will say that I think 7.69 is much better than 12, if we want to look at the overall, as far as the health goes. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, So, my thought is, first of all, I appreciate the work that went into this. It's much easier to make a decision when we have this laid out like this. And, you know, the explanations tonight are very helpful as well. So with that being said, I mean, we're not pigeonholed into these different tiers.
Yeah.
Like, we can draw our own lines, because personally, I'm in favor of the tech integrator. And, you know, I would probably draw my line right above that. So basically, we'd be looking at the version 8, 4.19, and then adding the tech integrator back into that. So I don't know what that ends up with for a percentage, but I'm ballparking it would probably be like 4.4%, something like that, Chris. Be pretty close, 4.35, something like that. So, yeah, we're not limited to these four choices. We can do what we think is right, but that would be my preference, would be to leave the tech integrator in, along with, definitely not touching the 2 teachers at the bottom. Those are my feelings.
I agree. Anybody else?
Same thing, exactly. Keep the tech integrator.
It works out to be like 4.32, 4.33 with pre-K. I mean, pre-K drops it down a little bit. 4.2.
Can you talk to me about the core switch? Because I know it's high up there on the list of items to remove, so it's not likely too harmful. However,
It's actually going to be replaced.
Okay.
But
Should
it's
it go
going
down?
No, I will be bringing it to finance, that we can take care of it now out of existing technology money. And this came up in Bob's budget presentation, we can't do that again.
Right. It's 3 schools that granted 2 of them are elementary schools, but they still rely very heavily on technology, so.
So that would be getting that done now.
That was it.
Just a second. I'm going to butt in. What is the implication of eliminating the 3rd bus, other than if we're going to be traveling around in an older bus, or any concern with that?
The only concern is going to be for the next person who sits in the seat, that they're going to have to deal with an extra bus 10 years down the road. So whoever's sitting here then will have to figure out what to do in the replacement cycle that year. So it's pushing something 10 years out.
Okay. I see the value in a tech integrator. So my question is, because I don't want to keep bumping this up percent-wise, because percent-wise doesn't give us what the dollar figure is, what is it going to cost the taxpayers, which, bottom line, and I know the town is also going up this year, I just don't know the percent yet. Are there other places, like last minute, because it happens every now and then, is there any possibility of any relief coming in anywhere else in the budget that's basically not right here in front of us?
The only possible savings would be is if Augusta decides to change the school funding and they send additional subsidy. But as far as actual expense side, no. I mean, there's quite a bit of work that was done to get to this number where we're at.
Right, I know.
It's going to be existing staff.
Okay, so the tech integrator is something that we don't have at the moment.
We don't currently have that position.
Okay, so we're not eliminating it by not having it, we're just not giving them the extra help they are requesting. Okay.
I 100% support the tech integrator. Given the investment that we have, which we just saw, of all the devices, personally, I think it would be prudent to have someone to assist with all of those devices. So what am I hearing? First tier, yes. Second tier, yes. Is that where we land?
Can I ask Kate? What I'd like to see, and what we usually see before we vote on this, is, okay, bottom line, what is this implication? what do each one of these equate to as to, okay, this is what's going to be the tax increase on I don't know why they keep using the value that they use for a house, because you can't even buy one that cheap anymore. But anyway, what is the tax implication of each of the percents? This is all really nice. We say these percents, but it would be nice to have a dollar figure there if possible before we vote.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely send that
Okay.
to the board to see what that looks like. Something, though, just to be mindful of is that we use what comes off main revenue service. Town of Wyndham does not use what comes off. They're higher. So we can predict. However, it's a prediction. We do not set mill rates. So we do the best that we can. I think it would also be helpful for the board to see historically, because if you were to look at the increase as compared to 2 years ago, it's very different, the increase, if you look at it compared to last year. So we can give you all that information and give you the history. We can pop that in the packets for Friday and have that up for the...
Okay. Could we get it from the town, though? If you gave them, if you said, here's the percent we're looking at, what would it look like for you guys?
I can ask Barry, and also for the folks in Raymond. I'm just wondering... Yeah, I mean, they ultimately, the council and the select board set the tax rate based on where they're at, so I can give you, probably the best thing to do to have it be apples to apples, because it's been reported this way since this district started, is what is on the main revenue website for total valuation for the communities, and that go off of that.
Okay, good.
That'll give you apples to apples.
Good.
And would we expect that information in our packet or earlier?
I actually can get it for Friday.
Okay.
What's today, Wednesday? Yeah.
Okay. So are you clear where we're at? Are we all clear? Please.
Yeah, no, just to clarify, because
Yep.
you went through, you said tier 1, yes, tier 2, but then tier 3 we're kind of breaking up, because we're
Right.
going to eliminate the social worker, the 20,000. So basically, we're making all of the cuts except for the tech integrator and the 2 teachers.
Correct. All right, thanks for the
I'll make sure, yeah, that
Yeah.
we're all on the
And then-
same page.
So then where do we land on, which version do we land on?
We land on version 8 plus, but then
8
adding
plus the
adding back the
73
tech integrator.
and the 2 teacher.
No, they were never taken out.
They were never taken out.
We're correct.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So you would provide us, given this information, and are we all in agreement? An updated. Okay.
Yeah, it would be an updated version 8. And then additionally, I can give you the tax history. And again, it's fictitious,
I know.
but it gives you the comparison.
It's good to have a guesstimate.
Because even looking at the Town of Wyndham website, there's an additional $100+ million that they list as what's taxable versus what main revenue services list.
They're going to do a reevaluation anyway.
So the updated information will also include a revised explaining your budget? Okay. Great.
I have one. So this is just a question, just so I understand part of how this all works. So, for example, the core switch you mentioned, instead of including it in the budget for next year, you're going to pay it out of funds from this year. Okay, I get that. So am I to assume that something that had money allocated to it will no longer be paid for with that money because we're going to switch it to the core switch, or is this excess funds in the budget?
This is going to be a balance transfer, most likely from savings that you've seen from having some of these open positions over time. And we're allowed to do transfers between the cost centers. Those all go to finance to get approval. Also, the other thing we'll take a look at is where we're tracking for year-end balance, and if there's some capital projects that the board wants to set some money aside for. And then, in addition, that's it, actually. There's no addition to that.
So, one more little question. So, if we end the budget year or end the year with excess funds in the budget, that money gets set aside, and then you mentioned, I think, in the last couple weeks that whatever is approved by the taxpayers when they vote, that is the maximum that can be spent in a year, regardless of how much excess from previous years exists, correct?
Exactly.
So,
And we just add one more thing, is that we typically add between $1 million and $1.2 million of previous years carryover back to reduce taxation.
okay. All right, so at some point, we don't just keep building on this excess year over year. At some point, it gets used. Okay, perfect, thank you.
Anyone else? This is the last, well, we still have one more opportunity to discuss it before we vote next week, but I don't see any. I want to thank you for going back and the A-team, and I know it took some dialogue with everybody to come up with these lists, and it was very helpful. I think we all agree to have it laid out like that. So next week, in the meantime, you'll present us with some documents that we can look at, and then next week we will vote on this budget.
And then just, again, for the board and the public, what you approve then goes to the public on May 18th. They ultimately have to approve it, which then go to the voters on June 14th. So there's still, this is a multi-step process, and in RSU, it goes to a public budget meeting. Other districts, that may go to a town council. We don't go that step because we're our own quasi-municipal organization, so it still goes then. And ultimately, what you will vote on next week will be what is the ceiling, your recommended ceiling for RSU 14.
Are you all set? Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item 11, a vote to I'm not even going to read it. Somebody else can read it. Who would like to make the motion?
I move to authorize the superintendent to enter into the financing agreement for the lease purchase of photocopiers and printers, and to accept the proposal of Gorham Savings Leasing Group, LLC, the bank, to provide tax-exempt lease purchase financing for 53 photocopiers and 168 printers, the equipment, in the principal amount of up to $466,031.93 at an interest rate of up to 2.95%, fixed for a term of up to 5 years.
Second.
Thank you. Any public comment on the motion? Any board discussion? All those in favor? You good? There's a second component. Who would like to do that one?
Okay. I move that the resolution entitled Resolution to Authorize Lease Purchase of Photocopiers and Printers in the principal amount of $466,000. Is that a typo? It's supposed to be $31.93.
It is a typo.
Oh. Well, I'm going to read it right. Again, $466,031.93 be adopted in form presented to this meeting, and that a copy of said resolution be filed with the minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Thank you. Public comment? Board discussion? Yep.
Yeah, just one small point. Oh, thank you. And this actually kind of goes back to the other one, but usually we have set terms, set interest rates. The first thing said up to this, up to that, up to 5 years. So do we not have finalized terms on those?
We do. It's an interest rate of 2.95, fixed for 5 years, so.
All right, so that whole up to is irrelevant at this point.
Yeah, the motion that came from the attorney, so, well.
We see that in term letters and things, but, all right, so that's fine.
And if I just also add, this copier lease and printer lease actually is a net reduction for the overall budget because it reduces some costs that we currently have because of the age of our printers and the age of our photocopiers. So it does result in a net reduction operating cost.
We should be able to approve this, as I said, because not as written, so we won't have to alter this at all.
You're the parliamentarian.
Yeah, we're all set. I made the motion correctly.
Okay. All those in favor? Thank you. Item number 12, policies.
I move to approve the second reading of revised policy IMBB, accommodation of sincere beliefs in required instruction.
Seconded.
Thank you. Any public comment on the motion?
Hi, I'm Kristen Day. I wrote an email that had a lot of my comments. It was quite lengthy. I have a couple of highlights because there are just some things. I know you're going to pass it. You mentioned, I don't know if people know how it works, like making policies. And I know I don't actually have a say. I'm not on the board, but I'm still going to say them. Letter E. It says if there's a conflict with the sincerely held religious beliefs of a student or their parent or legal guardian, that's when you can ask for accommodation. I really think that it should add or personal beliefs or morals beliefs, because many controversial subjects come from things other than religion. The second thing is accommodation. This isn't something that you're going to change, but it's a really important thing for people to consider. A lot of times with the language of accommodation comes the flip side of what you get when you get that accommodation. Sometimes you are treated as though you have been accommodated. So kids whose parents ask for alternate materials, I think it's really important that teachers treat them respectfully in front of the other students so they're treated well, not like they're doing something different. The third thing, and it's the last thing, it says, it's just communication. Communication with parents is a theme that we've really pushed. We would be so much more comfortable, parents would, if there was. Now, none of the three policies, or the two tonight, mentions communication, but the policy IMBB allows for parents and guardians to request alteration of instruction, but if there's no requirement on what the communication to parents or the notice to parents needs to entail, how would parents know to request it? As it stands, I've gotten a million of these emails, but over the years I've thought, oh, they're reading this controversial book, it's an approved curriculum, and I'm sure that it's going to be great for my kid. The theme is to prevent bullying, absolutely. But what it might not say is, the subtext is that there might be a homosexual couple, and it might, they might have bullying because of that. So the email, there's no outline or guidance for teachers on how to communicate what is going to be entailed that might be controversial to people. So, and Chris, you said that for now, oh wait, no, that's different. Yeah, that's really all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment from the public? Board discussion. Thank you. Very nice. Very good.
Doesn't recognize me.
So, do we still have a final reading?
This is it. We've had it first. You weren't here.
Okay.
Yeah, he was here by Zoom.
Oh, yeah, you were here on Zoom. So
Was I on Zoom? That's right. Okay, so this is the one that I was asking about.
Last meeting was the first.
All right.
I had asked how often this had been used, and just curious if you got the data for us. Sorry.
No, actually, I could only come up with maybe 2 or 3 times that someone has asked a comment. And this is specific to required instruction through main learning results and what's in the required curriculum, which you can find in the course guides and curriculum guides that are available. And just to answer the question about why specific language, because that lines up with language and statute for the request for accommodations.
Anybody else? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. Where are we? Go? Yep.
I move to approve the second reading of revised policy ILD, educational research, student submission to surveys and marketing information.
Seconded.
Thank you. Any public comment?
I was reading that, and it appears a little bit confusing, and I believe that in the first line, it states that none of this information will be used for marketing purposes. But then a few paragraphs down, it says that the superintendent is responsible for protecting the student's privacy when it is used for marketing purposes. So that seems to contradict the initial statement and clarification that it's not being used for marketing purposes. The other thing that I noted, on this was that you tend to go to an opt-out option for parents, and I believe that at some point in time along the way, we need to discuss having an opt-in. Having a parent, if they want to participate, they can opt in to participate with something like this. And that way, we're not, being lost in the emails and that type of thing, and we're getting the information and we're deciding, what we want to do. Sometimes if parents miss it and it's an opt-out, it's just like too bad. So I think that would give a little bit more control back to the parents to be able to look at an opt-in option versus an opt-out. And also, I did not have any understanding that the Department of Education actually pays our district for surveys. It says if they're funded by the Department of Education, that they'll be under different guidance. And I'm wondering how that differs, what type of surveys those look like versus ones that are not. And I know that you've already proposed this and it's going to be voted on, but I think these are things we need to take in consideration.
Thank you. Anybody else?
As far as the surveys, first of all, I want my daughter completely removed from taking any surveys. I think parents should have an option at the beginning of the year to completely remove them if they choose to. I don't know why the school feels it necessary to allow any clubs to ask about sexual identity, race, or religion. And as a youth coach of many years, if I have those conversations with my players, I'm going to be removed. If that happens in a workplace, that is sexual harassment when you're talking about that type of stuff. So I don't understand why the school thinks it's okay to ask these personal questions. I think that this tool can be used appropriately, which I believe that initially that's the goal, to find out if there's actual kids going to school hungry and they don't feel safe in school. I mean, that's really what I thought that this was supposed to be about. So I'd really like that to be considered to remove the other stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, Kristen Day. Along the lines of my other comment, it says parents and guardians have the right to inspect any survey created by a third party before it's distributed or administered to students. Parents and guardians may also inspect any instructional materials prior to scheduled date of survey. Number one, again, because of communication, there's no outline as to what communication is required to send to parents for notice. How are parents going to know it's a third-party survey? We didn't even get an email in the fall when the survey went out, and if we did get a survey now, we have no way of knowing if any given teacher is going to say it's a third-party survey, so we can refer to this policy. Second, along the same lines, how are we going to know if there are related instructional materials if we haven't been told there are related instructional materials? It comes back to communication in the same way. So I think that you're missing some language. Rather than consent, it should be informed consent, because the parents are not being informed. And Chris, you mentioned that in the last meeting that for surveys, you said we're doing notice for all the surveys. We're treating them all the same right now, because like Robin said, they have different standards depending on how they're funded, which, okay, it's controversial. I don't understand that. But that's not a policy. That's just your word. That's just you saying we're doing it this way. But how, like, if there's no policy with third-party surveys to protect, like, for coming out for clubs or whatever, how do we know we're going to get one if it's a controversial thing? Like, you know, I don't know what they're going to do next time. Maybe they're going to wear something different. I don't know. That's the whole thing. We don't know. And you just send notice home first. If everything that you guys are doing is so great for kids and that's awesome, just tell us. We want what's best for all the students too. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Board discussion? All those in favor?
Think you're going to talk. I thought you were.
We're good, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, report of the secretary. Motion, please.
I move to approve the minutes of the March 30th, 2022 meeting.
Second.
Any public comment? Board discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Committee reports. Finance.
Has not met.
Facilities. Ooh.
All right, hang on, I gotta find my cheat sheet. Facilities did meet. We had cookies. So we reviewed a lot of the revolving renovation projects. So I'm just going to kind of run down the list here real quick because Bill was kind enough to give us a cheat sheet. So Raymond Elementary School security update. That project is just about wrapped up. There is a few minor things that need to be finished up, and then the contractor will get paid. So I'm pretty sure the contractor is chomping at the bit to get a $30,000 check. So I'm sure that they will be getting that wrapped up pretty quickly. Jordan Small security update, working with CHA to improve mostly doors, frames, the height, and then 2 vestibules, one at the main entrance, one at the gym area. Basically, it's just going to kind of help improve security on that. So those bids will be going out within the next few weeks. Jordan Small asbestos abatement, that work is now complete. The Field Allen asbestos abatement, that work is now complete. The Wyndham Middle School exterior ADA. So basically what's going to be happening is a walkway that is ADA compliant is going to be built and installed, and that is basically going to, if you're in the parking lot getting ready to walk into the gym, a lot of people typically will walk into the gym and then they will have to walk across the floor to the bleachers on the back side of the wall. And there's really no way to access a wheelchair because it is a step up right there. So what is going to happen is a new walkway is going to go around the towards the back side of that building from the parking lot itself, and then you will be able to get a wheelchair into the gym from there, and you'll be on the correct side of the gym once you enter. So let me see here. All right, and then Wyndham Middle School interior ADA. That was basically the middle school locker rooms. The issue with that was the bid was coming in unbelievably high, to the point where I actually thought that Bill kind of dropped the ball and asked for gold toilets. But basically what he's doing is he's going to resubmit a bid, and he has lowered the cost of the materials that are going to be going into that project. So the fire alarm ADA upgrades for Wyndham Middle School, Wyndham Primary School, RES, and Jordan Small Middle School. There is an active bid currently out there right now. That bid is actually due back April 28th. The RES drinking water system, so basically what is going to be happening is there's a bid that's going to be going out on this Friday the 29th. Yep. And it's basically, it's more like a filter upgrade. So basically there is a storage tank that's underground, and he's going to pull that tank out, and the storage tank is actually going to be housed inside of the building with a filtration system and a water softener. So hopefully that will be much more pleasurable for drinking water. The Field Allen sprinkler system, that is, it looks like we had actually a domestic water supply line that was run into that building last summer actually. So now what is going to happen is we need to run a sprinkler system throughout that. And it was kind of interesting because of the age of the building and the rafters. Everything is, what do you say, 12 inches apart, or?
They're 13-inch rafters, and you're only allowed to sprinkle a 12-inch void.
Right.
So you're off by an inch.
Okay. So basically what they're going to do is they're going to shoot up instead of down, which is cool. So we got that going for us. And so that work's going to be completed at some point this summer. It's actually going to be an extensive amount of work. Pretty much everything in that building is going to have to come out, including the ceiling, which is brand new, but Bill assured us that he's going to save it, and we'll be able to reuse that again. So we've got that going for us. We got the Manchester HVAC upgrade. And the Wyndham Primary School HVAC upgrade. I've said this before, and I'm going to go ahead and say it again. At the start of COVID, Bill was at the forefront of this, and he basically said, this thing is airborne. We got to get some fresh air pumped into these schools. And that's exactly what he did. And so kudos to Bill and his team. But we still have some HVAC systems to go. So Manchester HVAC upgrade is that bid is going to be going out to replace the current rooftop units. Those units are 22 years old on top of Manchester. And then eventually what's going to happen is the board is going to have to vote on these particular topics, because there is some expenditure involved with that. And then pretty much the same goes with the Wyndham Primary School. You got, I can't remember how many HVAC systems. He's air handlers for A, B, and C house, but I don't remember how many rooftop units that was. Do you?
I don't know. I can find that out. I do know that there's also been a lot of work done there on energy recovery units as well to capture all the cold or the warm coming out. But I'm not sure if they're rooftop. They may be ground, because Wyndham Primary has got the metal roof.
Yeah.
So you can't do rooftop units. Some of them up here and some of the connectors, but maybe a combination of rooftop and ground units. But I can find that out from Bill.
Excellent. All right. And then moving on. The Manchester Site Improvement Project, so basically we're still continuing to work with the town to develop additional ball fields. And that work is expected to start in the summer of 23, sorry. And then we got some site work change, so basically Bill is working with Stantec. Dwight is basically designing how traffic would come into that complex and basically separating the buses from the drop-off and the additional entrance from 115. And then basically, the parking lots. And then the town of Wyndham is continuing to work with the Portland Water District to develop a treated water disposal. So basically that is going to be underneath one of the fields. And then finally, we have the Manchester boiler. And we are looking to replace the second boiler over at Manchester. If you guys recall, it was this winter that we had a boiler that cracked right at the very start of it was the start of the winter, wasn't it? It was making us a little nervous, but so we got to replace the other one, and that cost is actually included in Bill's 23 budget as a 5-year lease payment. And that is my facilities update at almost 10 o'clock at night.
That's it? That's it?
Well, thank God for Bill for leaving the cheat sheet for me.
Is there a Wyndham Middle School meeting?
Yes, there is a meeting tomorrow.
Wyndham Raymond?
There is a middle school building committee meeting tomorrow at 6 via Zoom.
Thank you. Curriculum.
Curriculum meets Tuesday.
Okay, anything from adult ed? I'm going to ask.
Yes.
Oh, all right.
We are tentatively going to be meeting on April 16th from 6 to 7, and I don't know mode yet, but it should be either in person or via Zoom.
Perfect. Thank you. Anything for March for vote? No? I've already asked you, and policy is meeting on Monday. So that's it for committee reports. At this very late hour, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yep. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Yep. Thank you, and good night.
Wait,
that's my bedtime.
Pete, when you get back, would you like me to forward it to you?
Oh, cookies.